what happened in Aurora, Colorado with this supposedly gang takeover. Because I kept saying to people, this has got to be like the greatest property management drama that you've ever seen that's been quoted by the presidential candidates that's been in the news. Here's a couple of the headlines about this. Fox News reported Venezuelan's gang takeover of Aurora, Colorado. Newsweek reported Aurora, Colorado mayor responds to allegations of the Venezuelan gang takeover. Colorado law firm report claims Venezuelan gang has stranglehold on apartment. Have you heard about this story, McKay?
I haven't really done a deep dive.
Okay, so you're going to let me take the heat on this one.
Because
you're going to let me take all the heat on. Okay, I'm a big boy. I can handle it. Okay, we're going to talk about, and it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, I did see the reports about the people complaining about a lot of unsavory individuals who are frequenting the neighborhood.
And I got to say, you saw the video, right? So it's hard in today's day and age when you have video evidence like this, it's hard to ignore that video, which blew up on social media the last 2 weeks. And that is of armed gentlemen with AKs going into, knocking on apartment doors, using an axe to beat down the door to get into the apartment. I mean, when you look at that video and it's been verified that that was happening, that's some scary stuff.
Yes.
Okay, very scary stuff. But really, that's not the scariest part about the whole story. And so when you get past the sound bites and start looking deeper into the articles, yes, there was a viral video like that. And it's bad. And I really think that it is being politicized on a national level from that video. But when you go back and you look at what was happening, so this was at an apartment complex called The Edge at Lowry. And according to an NPR radio story on September 6th, they broke a story that included a press conference by the tenants saying that this property for months and previous years had a magnitude of issues leading up to that.
Yes.
And then you've got a direct quote from the mayor of Aurora saying in that article, I'm not dismissing the concerns at all, but whatever initially happened initially, what I can tell you now is that there are not gangs in control of that complex. That's the quote that was coming from the mayor. And so there's a lot to unpack here. But originally when this story broke, it was the main headlines were that a Venezuelan gang had taken over control of the complex and was taking rent from the tenants. Partially, there's partial truth to a lot of these, right? But not the whole truth. But here's what had happened. And the law firm went in, they interviewed the property management companies that were there. And the property managers that were there had supposedly vanished from the property, were not there actively managing the property anymore. And so there were some tenants that might have been paying money to people that were not the property managers. But what you also had happening was a lot of tenants who weren't paying anybody and stopped paying because the manager that had previously been there got the absolute tar beat out of him.
Ooh.
Okay. And so we have a property management company in Tri-Cities. And I got to tell you, this really hits close to home. In fact, I brought the manager. We've got in the studio with us RJ Lang from the Kenmore Team Property Manager, Managing Broker. RJ, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here and not in Colorado.
Okay. Well, I wanted to bring you here as an example.
Yeah. So
you to give people perspective upon what went on there. Let's say RJ and I are managing some houses and some complexes that we have here in Tri-Cities. And I send RJ out over there, and it's a small portion of our portfolio. And RJ gets the absolute tar beat out of him. And he's in the hospital. And I'm dealing with RJ being in the hospital. And what I'm more concerned about is dealing with RJ's wife. Because she's going to beat the crap out of me if that happens to you. And so then we've got to look at that complex. And I've got to say, as the owner of the company, who am I going to send next over there? Am I going to send Brett over there into this dangerous situation? What's going to happen? So now we're faced as a property management company looking at this and saying, where do we get help from this situation? Can we get the police? Which you should be able to, but there's official channels. These things take time, right? And so there's a lot going on. And you've got to have proof of who did this and who was involved in this. And let's say we make the decision at some point that it's just too dangerous and we're going to turn management back over to the owners and just say, look, this is not a situation that we feel safe sending our employees into anymore. And we're going to turn that back over to the owners. It's my understanding that these properties in Aurora are also out-of-state owners. So they're not the boots on the ground in that situation for what's going on.
So was the property management person that got assaulted, was it by the tenants or by these visitors?
Okay, it was not by the tenants.
It was by some of the people doing things similar to the video.
Here's the thing. The original story says that he had said that this was not the tenants that did this. This was somebody. There's a quote in there that said they had gone to this property manager and they requested that if he shared 50% of the rents with them, with these individuals, that they would be able to make it a lot easier for him to manage the complexes.
Oh, so it was kind of like...
like skimming
strong arm
off of that.
Skimming,
At the same time, there were some tenants that were late on some rent, and these tenants were arrested, but they were late on some rent, and he had told them that they were late on the rent and given them a compliance notice. And when he did that, they went back to their apartment to get weapons and said they were coming back to kill him. And so in that situation, they did call 911. They were arrested in that situation. And so that started some of these arrests and these news stories. But mind you, a lot of this was happening prior to the video that you saw and the political nature of what's happened as this blew up. And so I think a lot of what happened is then in the meantime of this transition, these owners are either trying to find new property management or they're not. Obviously, it didn't happen in a timely manner. And then the next question is, what type of company are you going to get to go back into that situation? It's going to be very, very difficult. I mean, if we're meeting with a new customer and RJ and I sit down with a new customer and we're like, hey, why are you looking at a different property management company? And they're like, well, my last guy's in the hospital and there's been some issues over there. That's a very, very difficult situation for a new company to go into. And so there's a lot of layers there that would have to be investigated. But why I say that this is a complicated situation is because one of the biggest complaints that you're seeing come out of the news is that Denver and those surrounding areas are a sanctuary city. They feel like they're getting a large immigrant population coming in there. And I'm not talking about that and what's going on. But I'm talking about from a property management standpoint, this affects what we call in the business occupancy rules. And they're saying that this complex, I watched numerous YouTubers who have gone in there and influencers that had gone in there and done interviews. In this complex, they started to have too many people in a small area. And so reason I wanted to get RJ on the show in here was talk about, RJ is, you guys are very conscious of occupancy rules. How does that work, like from a practical standpoint in somewhere like Tri-Cities?
In putting people in units or in houses, you have to have a capacity for the unit. So if it's a larger home with either 3 or 4 bedrooms, it's 2 people per bedroom is our occupancy standard. So it's either if you're in Richland and you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath duplex, let's say, then we say there's 3 adults per bathroom. So that's the only exception that we make to that rules of 2 people per bedroom. And the reason that we have these occupancy and capacity is because once you get over that threshold, the condition of the property starts to go downhill. It's harder to maintain, and then sometimes you even have more people to deal with, and other tenants or roommates may not know what's going on with the same property, and they should.
And so, yeah, you bring up a good point. So here we have a property management issue. We have occupancy limit issues. And then the property management company disappears because of what happened in this situation. How do you enforce that here locally? Like, how do you control that?
Well, we have to start with it on the front end in our viewing. So when they schedule a viewing, we make sure that we ask the right questions, how many people are going to be occupying the property, and then we verify it with their application. And further down the road, after they move in, and we make sure that only the people that have leased the property are moving into the property and accepting keys, then our twice-a-year routine inspections can determine, we'll see either some instances where there may be extra beds, and we'll ask the right questions to say, hey, what's going on with this situation, and get a response that hopefully sits well with us, or we'll look further into it, give compliance notice, and run down that situation.
So those inspections are key.
They are definitely.
For this situation in Aurora, if the property management company disappears, they're not doing those inspections.
No way.
And then these occupancy issues start to creep up. So this is a major property management issue. I think what's interesting about the story, too, that's not reported often in the clickbait headlines, is that there was the lender who represents these apartment complexes, meaning that's who gave the money to the owners, who were out-of-state owners. They are the ones that commissioned the law firm to do this investigative report that then was presented to the city of Aurora, because there was a lot of code violations happening at these apartments. When those code violations started happening, they started, I'm only guessing, but based upon the deep dive in what I've read, there's no way a lender is going to go this far and do this unless they're concerned about the value of their asset. Which either means the owners stopped making payments, or the owners were telling them at some point, like, I think we have a problem developing with this property. We can't get control of it. So the city was trying to condemn the property because of all the code violations at some point. And honestly, I mean, it's like I said, it's a multi-layered sad situation, because when that starts to happen now, these folks that had rented these apartments, whether they were rented legally or they were rented from somebody or sublet illegally, in that situation, when the property gets condemned, they had a deadline and then they had to move out. Where are those people going to go in that city? They don't have rental history. They don't have money for deposits. Luckily, the city stepped in and had some hotel rooms lined up. But in that situation, if what was happening is really true, if the property management company had threats of violence, had to go to the hospital, had been in trouble, and had to leave the property, likely for the lender, the only way that they might have been able to regain control of that property was to completely shut down the whole property. And then I got to tell you, too, when we look at these situations, what RJ talked about with high occupancy rates was the conditions. The conditions in that situation, from what I've seen in the videos, were terrible living conditions. There were situations where they talked about numerous situations of mold and what was going on. And as if this story couldn't get any crazier, John.
Okay.
It was reported at one point that nationwide, the Hells Angels were headed to Colorado to take back the apartment complexes.
Oh, boy.
So I finally found where they actually released the Colorado Club to Channel 9 News and posted on Instagram. They released an official statement that said the Hells Angels Motor Club denies the foundation and validity of these absolutely ridiculous and false claims. It also goes on to say that the club does not get involved in political issues outside of motorcycling and does not take a stance on immigration or the presidential election.
Wow.
John, I got to tell you, you know what's crazy about this entire story in the Aurora, Colorado saga? Is that the most well thought out, best response came from the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Okay,
Yeah.
now they're either using AI to write these responses or it was absolutely brilliant. And either way, I don't care. Like it was a fantastic response. So all of those TikToks that you saw, those Instagram stories, they were saying these were like old videos. There was previous rallies going on in Colorado that they were going to. I mean, that would literally be like me going back to our office and I've got like two guys that ride motorcycles and I'm like, hey guys, RJ had a problem over there at the Commons and I need you guys to roll out there to, you know, and check on him. Okay. I mean, just the absurdity of what went on with these headlines was crazy. So that wasn't happening. And like I said before the break, we've got a lot more of some basic property management stuff happening. Like when people stop paying rent and owners are out of state and the property management company disappears and is not paying the bills, utilities get cut off. And so when you look at these news stories, a lot of these shots were showing like piles and piles of garbage. Well, no one was paying the bills. And so utilities weren't happening. And so I go back to this as a property management story. And so RJ, like, how do you guys handle utilities? Like what's that look like? How can we relate that situation to what would happen here in Tri-Cities?
Well, all the bills come to the property management company. So unless it's single family, then it's all in the tenant's name. But if it's in the owner's name with a CSA or continual service agreement, then all the bills are going to the property management company. So if those aren't getting paid, the trash, typically in multifamily, it would be water, sewer, garbage, and sometimes even electricity. So if that's the case and they're having no utilities, that gets a little out of control.
So basically, for the layman like me in the audience, if someone says, I've got a 10-unit apartment complex, I want you to run it. Basically, instead of like as a homeowner, we pay the PUD. What they would do is, aren't the utilities included as part of the rent?
They can be in a complex like
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
But basically, if not, they would, instead of paying the PUD, they would be paying you guys or whoever the responsible party is for running the building, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if that person disappears, then those bills aren't getting paid.
And that's like in the contract, you know, you'll say, okay, you want us to manage your property, then we're going to take care of the utilities, we're going to take care of the maintenance, we're going to take care of the garbage, you know, and all that.
Right.
So, okay, that clarifies it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, you can see what happened is as those people became fearful and disappeared, and those bills stopped getting paid. I mean, the residents were reporting that they were taking turns, like loading up the garbage in pickup trucks and hauling it away
To the dump.
Yeah,
Wow.
because no one else was doing that.
Well, then, and you brought up the good question. Why wasn't the water and electricity cut off?
Yeah, and really, I think that when you look at the previous building that was condemned, that was part of what had to happen in that situation.
Oh, okay.
Now, the story behind the story is that was this story released and politicized because they didn't know what to do at that point? Meaning, like, when those bills weren't getting paid, when things started to get run down, the city started to give compliance notice of things to be fixed. And when they started claiming we can't fix it because of ABC, was that just a big excuse that they gave, or were these things actually going on? And that's why they hired the law firm to present the study saying these things were going on. And like I said, there's like 4 major issues happening with this entire process.
Yeah, and it didn't start overnight.
It didn't start overnight. It had been going on for a while. some of the most interesting videos that you look at and that you've also got to realize from people is there's single family homes across the street.
Yeah.
You know, from these complexes. And so they did some interviews with the neighbors and what was going on there. Those neighbors were reporting that they were seeing multiple police responses, you know, during the day, plus gunshots in the area. I mean, it's a tough situation until they get that ship righted, get somebody back in there actively managing it. And I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, that we always talk about a lot is RJ mentioned CSAs. So for the layman's out there, I know you gave the description, but what does a CSA do for a property owner?
It tells the utility company that the owner of the property is this owner, and we are the manager. We're representing the owner. So we want to make the decision on behalf of the property and the owner, and it allows us to do that. But if a tenant takes the utilities out of their name, it's going to revert back to the owner, and we are going to get all of the notifications and billing so that we can take care of it for the owner.
So, you know, on a very simple term for this complex, it sounds like what happened in those situations is they basically didn't have a CSA type of agreement, so that when things stopped getting paid, they weren't picked up in time to be rectified by the ownership, you know, of that building. And so, you know, we'd have to look at all those individual contracts to know, but as the saying goes, mistakes were made in that situation. And so looking at it, you know, in summary, there's a lot here. There is an immigration issue that people want to talk about that led to probably over occupancy of some of these units. So you've got stress on the property then. And then you've got when you have stress on a property like that, you're going to have more maintenance requests to keep up with. And then when those maintenance requests aren't being responded to, RJ, the importance of maintenance requests in your line of work?
The importance of open communication and a way for tenants to submit those maintenance requests is essential, to keeping the property in good condition for sure.
Yeah. And so then that starts to degrade. And then we have some violence that comes into play with that situation. And then from there, like, it's game over at that situation. And then it gets picked up in a presidential election, and we see it on the debate last week. So I mean, so it was crazy when I'm researching for this and looking at that and then hearing that. When you hear that soundbite, it's very, very different when you're like us and you're in the business daily. I mean, I knew right away, I'm like, there's got to be a property management angle to this. So our goal is that we would never have a situation like that happen here in our community. But you've got to watch out for these situations, study them, learn from them, and then make adjustments in your business so that these type of things don't happen. So you can be very, very clear by the fact that we have tight leases, we have systems in place for this, we have these CSAs that RJ talked about. And a lot of that to go into the situation. So like always, if anybody has any questions about that, please feel free to reach out and talk to me. I've probably spent way too much time and annoyed my wife way too much about this, but I do feel like we know a lot more than we knew before. As we wrap up, I want to get a quick pick 3 in because I talked to you about those smoking interest rates. They've lowered a lot. They've made houses in these price ranges way more affordable the last month. Pick number 1, 4333 Northwest Commons, 2,300 square feet in Pasco, 3-bedroom, 3-bath, kitchen with quartz countertops, stainless steel appliances, upper level style loft family room. Backyard has tons of patio space, full fencing, and RV parking. And that's coming in at $499,900. 4515 Sinai in Pasco is 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,531 square feet. Newer roof, brand new HVAC, split bedroom design, great kitchen, tons of counter space. Primary suite has a walk-in closet, private bath, fully fenced backyard, entertain out back. And this is coming in at $399,900, which with those interest rates make those payments much lower. And then pick number 3 in Kennewick, 2601 West Deschutes. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1276 square feet, LVP and wood flooring, bright kitchen. Primary suite has a 3/4 bath, tiled walk-in shower, and then out back, fully fenced backyard, big shed, big covered patio, great property. And that's at $355,000. So a year ago, we were like, man, rates are 7% and you can't find anything under $400,000. And now we've got properties in that $355,000 to $375,000 range. Rates are back to $565,000, $575,000. The market has completely shifted to help some of those buyers that were on the fence out of there. And RJ, real quick, RJ and I talk about this a lot. People that weren't ready to buy, you have a program with property management. They go into a lease with you. What happens when they're ready to buy?
Anytime that they're ready to buy, they find the house that they want to purchase. If they use Kenmore Team, we let them out of their lease the month that they close for free. No additional lease termination fee, no continual rent and utilities or landscaping. It's done the month that you close on your house.
That's awesome, because then you're not having to like time it out with, I've got to wait 6 months till my lease is up, or I got to wait 3 more months, but I really like this house. Fantastic program. If you're needing a rental because you're waiting and considering when to buy, get with RJ, get with Kenmore Team Property Management, figure out what that looks like for you. And like I said, once again, the Aurora deal, we are not Aurora.
No.
And we do not want to be. It has not been reported anywhere else, but this is a property management issue, folks, and we're here to help you solve your local ones. And we will be right back here next week.